hopefully will begin to tax or at least challenge your thinking. And you've got the basics, so now you can really push forward. So I didn't actually post it in the What's New yet. So you'll have to navigate to it directly. Exercise 2.02. I don't know why they're sorting that way at the moment, but I'll figure it out. So I'm looking to get some of these by Sunday, or all of them by Sunday, as a due date. It's still part of this introductory interactive texts exercise group, which doesn't make sense yet because I haven't built the structure to kind of talk about the groups, but I'll do that as we get more of them. Being explained in what's currently called the drag drop across wikis and serving 2 workshop, but really that's not what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to rename that workshop, but it'll still show up in the video. And then I wrote a set of directions, which you might want to get to directly. So segging into the next video, right, James? You're right there. Yeah, I figured. So what do I want you to do? Notice there's no additional resources, so there's no new code here that you're learning, I don't think. But if there is, I'll add it in if I come to it. I want you to write a story. It doesn't have to be long. I wrote a longish story. Yours doesn't have to be as long as mine. It can be honestly short, a couple paragraphs. It can be about anything in your life, and you'll see when we do the exercise what I'm after. I want you to develop skills creating tiddlers using fields. You've been using tags so far. Today we're introducing a different level of tiddler called a field. I'm going to introduce this concept called a template. And in about, I think next week, we'll talk about what templating means, but you'll have practiced with it and used it, and then I'll give you what it conceptually means. And you'll say, oh, I get it. And I want you to focus and develop more skills using that list, what's called the list widget, as well as importing tiddlers, which we do through drag and drop, and using macros. Actually, I don't think I ended up with any additional macros. So we're going to build a story, and then we're going to weekify it. And then we're going to weekify it more. So 3 levels. Okay. So you first have to get a story. I wrote one last night. I just, dogs in my life. I'm going to close my sidebar so you can see it broadly. That's a little long, maybe 700 words. But you can. I opened a tiddler and I just started typing. I said, oh, I have many dogs in my life. And I started typing about stories about the different dogs in my life. You could write a similar story about the cars in your life, or the fish in your life, or the people in your life. You could write about the games that you've played. You could take an essay that you wrote in freshman composition and use that if it tells a story. A piece of fiction that you've written. You can find somebody else's. You don't have to write this yourself. It doesn't matter. As you'll see, we're looking for different objects in the story. So, you know, my story is just about all the different dogs that I could remember. There's probably a few more. I realized last night, I said, oh, I forgot that stupid little dog that we had for a while. I hated that dog. But I didn't write about him. Okay. So I just wrote it out. Okay, I didn't write hypertextually. I just wrote the way that I've written in my non-hypertextual world. And then I created a new wiki and I dragged and dropped that across, and I'm going to go through those steps in a second, but I'm just going to outline all the steps that I took and show you what I did. Okay. And then I cloned this tiddler and wrote dogs in my life objects. And here, all I did was put double square brackets around the names of the dogs in my life, which will have the effect of making links to them eventually. And that's all I did. So, but I put it in a separate tiddler, so I have my narrative and then what I called my objects. And all objects has is brackets around, in this case, nouns, or the proper names of dogs. People, games, books, movies, whatever it is that you want to describe. Okay. So you see, it doesn't look much different except the dogs' names are blue. And they're all italicized because none of those tiddlers exist. Okay. And I put that in a new tiddly spot, and I'm going to open up the tiddly spot that I made. I can remember what I called it. SUNY Poly Steve Objects 2, because I thought today I'll do Objects 1. Okay. And so here's my narrative, and here's my objects. And just to refresh your memory, I want it here, sorry. If I wanted to drag the narrative over to my new TiddlyWiki, I grab it, I can play with it so I know I have it, I put it here, and I can import it, and there it is. By the way, that overwrites the wiki you have with the tiddler you have with that name without warning. Just so you know. Like it just, ooh, I just blew away. Yeah, you do have a backup of your old wiki that's there. And so every change, every save that you've made is saved there. So if you want to go back to what it looked like when I started, it might show up. It will show up eventually. So just to review that again, because I know some of you are having issues with saving, you click the control panel, you click saving, and there's a backups directory, and that lists all of your wikis going backwards, so you can get the old ones. Okay. So I'm gonna divide my screen. The next step, there we go. I copied the narrative in the tiddler. I'm on step 2.3, and then I bracketed my objects, and I'm asking you to have at least 5 objects. Right? I don't know, I had like 10 dogs. You don't need that many dogs. 5 is fine. More is fine too. I mean, it's just where you want to go. Here's the first complicated part is to create your first object tiddler. I should really do this. I'm gonna go back and redo this. I'm gonna create a new tiddly spot. I'm gonna call it SUNY Poly Steve Objects, and that way you can see it, because otherwise you'll. And then I'll skip forward to show you what I ended up doing. Create my wiki. To create? Yes. Paste, put my password in for the second time. Wait 10 to 20 seconds. Oh, got my saved wiki. There we go. So I'm going to drag, oh wait, it likes me to set a site name. If you don't do this, I think that screws you up, because then it's not going to save. Somebody was having issues saving, and I'm wondering if they missed this step. Because if you don't put your password in, it's not going to be able to save it. So that might be, that's a crucial step. I'm going to drag the objects over and import it. Okay, so here's my object tiddler I already named. So the next step is step 3, create your first object tiddler. And this is something you've not done at all. Okay, this is the new stuff. I'll click on that little dog Scampy that bit me when I was a little kid. And it was like years later that I realized what had happened after he bit me, because he disappeared from our life. I was like 8 or something. What happened? He went to live at a nice farm in the country, my parents told me. And I believed them. wrong. Anyway, I was traumatized by that, but I've recovered. So we've got a Scampy Tiddler. All my objects are going to get tagged dogs. I think it's dog, actually. So I put a tag in there, and I might copy the sentences from my narrative. So I'm going to copy these with copy, scroll down, and paste it as text. Okay. And the brackets don't come because I copied it from a non-open tiddler, and you can play with that and see the differences. So step 2, step 3, create fields. What do you know about a dog? Well, we know his breed. And he was a, what I describe him as, part beagle. I'm going to say who owned him. I'll say my parents. I don't know, how big was he? He was small. How long did he live? I don't know why I'm putting longevity, but we'll call it that. I don't know, 6 years. And I'm just going to put that as a number because and I'll add the word years when I want it. So I'll just put the number 6 so I can sort by the number. And feelings, I don't know. I hated him. Okay. You know, we live in a post-truth society now. So we don't even have to deal with that. So now I'm going to clone Scampy, if only we could. And my second dog, which I just remember, was named Coco, and I think I put it there. I'm going to scroll up and get Coco. Later we got a standard poodle. He was brown, blah, blah, blah. And the value of cloning is that I've already got those fields created. Breed, feelings, longevity, owner, and size. So we're going to call him a standard poodle. And I loved Coco. He lived for 12 years. My parents owned him, and he was big. Okay, so now I've got 2 dogs. And I continue to do that for each of my objects. Your fields can be whatever you want them to be. And you'll see as I go forward with this that it's sort of what they're called and the kinds of values you've seen, but that's the experience I want you to have by creating this object. It's like, oh, I've got to think hypertextually because these words hated and loved are going to show up later in my sentences. And so that's really what we're after. I'm going to pretend I did all that. And voila, here's my project with all of my 12 dogs. Birdie, Coco, Barney, Clover, Chester, Pippin, Zen, Kip, Husky, Scampy, and Charge. Okay. They all have the same fields. I forgot I added a field called status. And the status of the dog is either is or was. Whether the dog is with us or was with us. Just so my sentences would work. And you can go back and add fields anytime. Each object doesn't have to have exactly the same fields, but it makes a lot of sense for it to have the same fields. But if you decided, like I decided after all, I need a verb for my sentences, and I want the verb to be tied to whether the dog's still alive or not, you just go back and add the field. It's a little annoying, but not too bad. So I just did step 3, and then I did step 4. Repeat for each object, rename it with the name, copy sentences, put appropriate values in the fields. And now I'm to this step 5, which is hard and complicated. I've given you a template tiddler. Drag and drop it in, and let's look at a template tiddler. This actually is, let me find my template tiddler. There it is. There should be nothing in the review, it should be nothing visible. So I'm going to hide the show. And this is kind of code. This is like pure code. Okay. So we'll look at it and see if we can decipher it. I'm going to zoom it in. although it might be better to have it on your screen. You've seen that list filter construction before. It opens with $list and closes with $, with $/list. And the stuff in between is what happens. You've not seen this filter. What that filter does is it asks a question of the tiddler that it's confronting at the moment. And it says, is the current tiddler tagged with dog? So is current tag dog? And copy paste, and when it doesn't work, copy paste it again. Eventually you'll be able to figure out, oh god darn, I lost the bracket off the end there. But so I asked the question, is the current tiddler tag dog? If it is, then do the stuff between my list commands. If it isn't, then just go on and ignore me. So very, very common. If your filters, if your objects are called movies, you replace the word dog with movies and case sensitive. So if you use lowercase g for your games, then replace the word capital dog with lowercase g games. People, whatever it is, that's why you tag each of your objects. You tag your first object with a tag. When you clone them, those tags come with them. Okay. So if you've got your tags right, all your objects are going to show up. They're going to say, okay, apply this template when I display that tiddler. Okay. Then what do? I put an HR, which is a horizontal rule in HTML, single angle brackets, HTML, double angle brackets, TiddlyWiki macro. I just put an HR so it would be kind of clear. Okay, I know my template's working. The next line, like, what is that? So, welcome to transclusion. Next week we talk about transclusion and what it really is. This week we just do it. So, the wiki version of transclusion is when you put the value of a variable, or in this case of a field, you display it. So to transclude in TiddlyWiki, you enclose things in double curly braces. To link in TiddlyWiki, you enclose things in double square brackets. To transclude, you enclose them in double curly braces. Curly braces are the shift of your square brackets. So they're those things that you never use. Right? So you're probably wondering all your life, why do we have these keys on my keyboard? On your phone, they're hard to find because you don't need them very often. So you have to like dig through the secondary and tertiary keyboards to find them. Luckily, they're right there. And we use that vertical bar, the one, your pinky just above the enter return key to the right of the braces and square brackets key. We use that shift, the vertical bar, and we use the backslash. So we actually make use of your keyboard. We even use the tilde and the back tick, which is your left pinky on the top row. So you enclose the name of a field in the current tiddler in double curly braces and then double exclamation points. So the double exclamation points say this tiddler. If you take them off, it says the tiddler called, in this case, title, or the tiddler, just the tiddler name. So luckily you can just copy paste. Obviously you're going to replace your field size with the length of the movie. You're going to replace your field owner with the type of game that you created. Whatever your fields are, you replace your field names into my template that you've copied over. So here you can see, and I just started with the word fields colon, just so it's really clear that we're writing fields. And think about Scampy. I'm gonna zero out, and you should be able to see my Scampy tiddler. At the same time as my sentence. Yeah. So double curly braces, double exclamation point title is going to replace with the word Scampy. So Scampy status was a size, small, breed, beagle, owned by my parents. Scampy, lived/has lived. I got lazy. I could have made that a variable, but I was just lazy. It was late last night. Has lived for longevity 5 years. I hated Scampy. It's not like literature, but you get the point. So if we stop editing Scampy, we'll see that there's the sentences I pasted. That's the text field. And then below it, there's that HR, my first HR. And then below it is my sentence that begins with fields : Scampy was a small beagle owned by my parents. Scampy has lived for 5 years. I hated Scampy. Okay. So by doing this across dogs are fine, video game, whatever you want, right? But I just want you to have that experience of thinking. My goal is that as you're typing these fields, that sentence begins to resonate in your mind. So do you create your objects first and then write the sentence? You do it at all the same time, but you'll start writing in different levels, different dimensions, because you're writing in hypertext. So that's what's different about it. That's the template. I close the template with this stuff here. Those double carets, superscript the text, make it small, close double carets, and I paste the name of my template so that at the bottom of my template, there's a link to the template. Because what you do when you write is you go back and forth between your tiddlers and your template. So, oh, that's not quite right. You go edit the template, you look at the tiddler. Oh, that's not quite right. You have to go back. So you have to sort of be editing in both. So I like to create a link to both. You'll see that throughout designwritestudio.com. There's a link to template. So if you ever want to say, where's that text coming from? Because you open it up and like the text that you're seeing is not there. Click on the template and we'll tell you where it's coming from. You can do amazing things in templates. We're doing something pretty basic to start with. Okay. I didn't modify the template, so I'm going to move. That was step 5. So copy the template, adjust the first filter to match your objects, and adjust subsequent lines to capture fields you need to describe your objects. Yeah?
Step 4.2 says to copy sentences from your narrative. Can you just write your own sentences if you wanted? Like if the sentences around it didn't really fit into it?
Yes, in theory, but no, because what I want you to do is see how stupid it becomes. So I wrote a narrative, and so I kind of want you to go through the exercise. So if you would bear with the stupidity and the kind of how it doesn't make sense, because I want you to feel that. So I wrote this narrative as a story about my dogs. No objects. I just wrote it like the way that I would write if I'm in English 101 and the assignment was to write a little story about your dogs, here it is. You could print it and it would make sense. Then I added my objects, and that's why I have them in separate tiddlers. And now I'm weakifying it by breaking them into the objects. And so I wanted you to copy those sentences in as best you could, because you'll see in the next step, in step 6, the stories are really kind of dumb. And I wanted you to sort of see that and feel that viscerally. And if you rewrite them, then you'll miss this point. So if you would, for this exercise, stick with the point that I wrote, because that's exactly what it is that I want you to think about. So Steve or Steven? Steve. Only your mother calls you Steven, right?
A lot of childhood friends.
Yeah, okay. Only my mother calls me Steve. You jumped right ahead and you recognize that it's not going to make any sense. So you're right. But stick with it a little bit so at least we can see that it doesn't make sense. And so we'll see. That's it, and that's in the next step. So step 6. So I generated 3 stories. I'd like you to do at least 2. You can do as many as you'd like, but you kind of need to do 2. I did 3 because I'm a striver. Dogs in order of my feelings. Okay. I'll zoom in on this again. I had, I'm going to reveal this. Okay, you've done this before, this count filter. I just stuck it in there again. I think that's kind of cool. This makes me happy to do that. So I wanted you to do that and to feel powerful, right? So it goes and counts the number of things that are tagged dog. Don't forget to put that slash at the end before the last close angle bracket, because otherwise nothing will show up and you'll be frustrated. So I have had 11 dogs in my life. If I delete one of the dogs, it will turn to 10. So what's kind of nice about that is it keeps track of stuff. And the idea of writing, when I write, I have had angle bracket, $ count, filter equals, and at some point the syntax becomes familiar enough, your brain realizes that you don't have to put the number there, you don't have to count, that number is what your text tells it. And that's a different way of thinking and writing. So I didn't know how many dogs I'd written about. I was like, oh, 11. Okay, I've had 11 dogs in my life, some I liked, some I didn't. This is straight English. That list filter, and now we're doing something a little different, I think. Brandon. Yeah. Sitting next, I have to do this translation thing to get to Brandon. At the end of class yesterday, Brandon said, well, I want them to be listed in a certain order. So I showed him how to do sorts, so I'm going to show everybody, I promise you do sorts here. Adding to the end of a filter, sort feelings. And there's a little bit of syntax here that's important to get. There's that closed bracket over there. So I'm going to get rid of the spaces. So you got to close the whole filter in square brackets. And so that first bracket and the last bracket belong to the filter. And then, so it's tag, bracket dogs, sort, bracket feelings. So you end up with double brackets at the end. So I'm looking for everything that's tagged dog, and I want to sort my results by my feelings. By the contents of the field called feelings in each of the tiddlers called dog. And you can change this from feelings to longevity, from feelings to owner, from feelings to, what else did we have? Size. But we want this to be feelings. And then I wrote a little sentence. My feelings, and then the name of the dog title. So I don't like Kip, I hated Scampy, I like Charge, I like Chester, I like Birdie, I liked, because my feelings went from like to liked, and they're sorted alphabetically. I liked Coco, Husky, and Barney. No, Coco and whatever. I loved some of them, and I tolerate some of the others. Those are my kids' dogs. I only tolerate them. Okay, so this is a story. Stop that. This is a story generated hypertextually. It's not much of a story, but they get better. Okay? That's a really simple story, and you can write that story. It's just based on your fields. I wrote a second story. I'm going to put the home button out because I want to use it. Story 2, dogs in order of longevity. And let's look at this. Same first line, dogs in order of longevity, tag longevity. And I introduced the concept of a link to a tiddler here. So you can enclose with $link. And from either side of tiddler, it will take you to that tiddler. So now I can click on charge. It will take me to the charge tiddler. So link title / link status, charge is, and then longevity, 1 years old. And you can begin to see it's like 1 years doesn't make sense, but we live with that problem and we might fix it in the future, but I don't really feel like fixing it now. Okay. And then I put the text. That's the paragraph that I copied, and this is Steve's point. It's like, but some of it isn't going to make sense. Like if you look down, Pippin is 2 years old. One of my daughters lives in Brooklyn and has 2 dogs, a tiny little Yorkshire named Pippin and a yellow lab named, so it doesn't make sense. It's like, And then in your last part of the assignment, you write a little reflection piece and say, yeah, this kind of sucks because some of my text doesn't make sense. And you can't just take a narrative and Wikify it. And that was to demonstrate that point. So sorted by longevity. So the youngest or the shortest lived dog to the oldest dog. And you can see that's when we write in a narrative, we do these things like it's a story. When one of my twin daughters, well, that doesn't make sense if it's out of context. And that's okay for this assignment that that the context isn't, and you'll see that you have to, as you write hypertextually, you have to do a little bit more context sensitive work. Look at my third story, and if you want to be adventurous, you can try to do my third story. This introduces yet another feature. So this is a double list. I list all the features and then do it again. So I first list everything tagged dog, each owner. So it's like, okay, so the owners in my story were my parents, me, and my daughters. So for each owner, I'm first going to get, in order, alphabetical order, I'm going to get me, then all the dogs tagged my parents, and then, or my dog, I don't know, then my daughters, and then all the dogs tagged my parents. So I write a little sentence, owner owned how many dogs of the dogs in my life. And then I do another list filter, and you can look at that sequence, and you can look at those, and you can replace your field names and play with that. And so I have all the me dogs, me owned 4 of the dogs in my life. Obviously, it's a really awful sentence. So those are the dogs that I owned. And then my daughter owned 5 of the dogs in my life, and my parents owned 2 of the dogs in my life. So now we're beginning to build a more complex narrative, repeating all of those objects. So what you're seeing is the use of objects in multiple sequential stories. And if you can pull this off in your second week of in your second week of class of designing and writing interactive text, that's pretty impressive because you've now designed and written an interactive text. And we haven't allowed your readers to interact with it much, but there's 3 different versions. I think you can do it. The last piece I wanted you to do was create this. I didn't write the reflection, but step 7, create a reflection and write some notes about your process, like what'd you do, what worked, what didn't work, what are the advantages of generating stories with fields, what are the disadvantages. The disadvantage, obviously, it's Steve Drewer's tense, like some of them don't make much sense. The tense, the grammar, the language isn't set up for that, but at least you've got it. And then I want you to share it. So there's a lot in there. You should be able to drag and drop and modify. But most of the times I don't care that much if you follow the steps, and if you want to go off and do something else, that's okay with me. But I think if you kind of do the narrative, then the objects, and then Wikify the objects, it will allow you to see precisely why it's got its issues, but it will also allow you to build this thing. So I was going to have you do pictures with this, but I changed my mind. If you want to add pictures, like I could have gone and gotten pictures of each of my dogs, but I really want you to get the feel of working with multiple objects. So I didn't want to cloud your thinking with pictures. But if you want to do it, go for it. You can search tiddlywiki.com and learn how to add images. It's pretty straightforward. You basically drag and drop them in. They become tiddlers, and then you can reference them. You can do whatever you'd like, sort of, and go as far as you'd like. And yeah. So what I think we should do here, are there questions about those specific steps? I'll sort of stop the recording, let you play. We've got like 30 minutes of play.